Hey, what's up, guys? I watched The Last of Us Season 2, Episode 2 on Sunday, and I have some thoughts I wanted to share, but I mainly just need to get them off my chest. I always welcome feedback and discussion and comments, but this one might be a bit of a rant. If that sounds interesting, then let's dive into it. First off, here's your spoiler warning if you haven't played the game, as I will be comparing events in the game to the show, and we'll also talk about the ending and everything in between. As for the show, I will be discussing mainly Episode 2, also Episode 1, but to a lesser degree. I will be using footage from the game because I don't want to deal with HBO copyright striking my video and having to remake and or re-upload the video. So apologies for the lack of visual reference where I specifically discuss scenes from the show. I have a few friends who share my passion for both Last of Us games, and I've been discussing the last 2 episodes with them. Some of them are actually really enjoying them and don't really mind the changes the show has made, but in our conversations I get the feeling that they are so genuinely excited about the show that they might be watching it through rose-colored glasses a little bit. I was very excited about Season 2. Last of Us Part 2 is my favorite out of the 2, even if they both belong in the same place for me as one of my top 3 games of all time. Nevertheless, I can relate to the excitement because throughout Episode 1, I was watching with the same openness, and even though I had noticed some red flags, I chose to wait and see, which to a certain extent I still am. I will continue to watch every episode with some degree of excitement and hoping that my suspicions never materialize, but I have to say that right now, Episode 2 has me worried about the rest of the season and the one to come. My first problem is with the pacing of Episode 2 and the unnecessary changes to that part of the game. I think Season 1 struck such a good balance between making changes that significantly justify themselves by improving what was already there, while recreating scenes in the game so faithfully that you could feel the enormous amount of respect and love for the source material. That is what gamers want, and the numbers show that people who didn't play the game embrace that version of the story just as readily. I don't believe in changing things for the sake of doing something different, and that's what this season feels like to me. If you're going to change a story that managed to align so many complex elements so artfully, then you need to show how the changes are tangible improvements, and Season 2 feels like they either lost their courage as storytellers or are afraid of reliving the awful backlash that followed the leaks and release of Part 2. If the latter is the case, I can understand and empathize better because no one wants death threats to be sent to cast members, let alone someone acting on them. But it does mean that we are getting an inferior version of the story, and we need to come to terms with that. It's not a good look when a show feels afraid to tell the story at hand, and you can see how that echoes beyond it, especially a story like Last of Us 2. The day after Episode 2 aired, Pedro Pascal posted a selfie with Caitlin Dever. That's not a coincidence, and it's not subtle either. But it's the world we live in, and in the current climate, we have to reckon with how that instability can make a controversial story with fictional characters volatile on this side of the screen. In interviews, they've explained that the attack on Jackson was meant to show us how there's more at stake than Joel and Ellie. I don't even know how to respond to that because it feels like something so obvious that acknowledging it makes it worse, but this episode is all about Ellie and Joel, and to a lesser degree about Abby. The attack takes away so much from the tension of Joel walking into what will be the last mistake he ever makes. The dread that builds as you get closer to the moment Abby shoots his leg is like a main character they decided to just write out of that whole sequence. That takes me to Abby's exposition dumps. I'm just gonna say it. This show thinks the audience is too stupid to follow the story without spoon-feeding them every story beat and answering questions before they can ask them. Part of what made the game such a masterpiece of writing was how it refused to provide answers for you. You had to sit with your own discomfort about what it presented you with, and that in turn made your gears turn in revolutions. If their gamble paid off, it made you grow as a person. It challenged your bias and hypocrisy by presenting you with a mirror every time you wanted to take the easy way out. It gave you a way to tap into something deeper and reach a place of insight and self-critique you might have only had faint intuitions about before. The show so far is making it very clear that it doesn't trust a different audience to do the same, and it has decided to remove the choice to hate or love its story from the equation by taking the safe route. I really hope I'm wrong and this is all justified in the remaining episodes, but these 2 episodes signal a bigger departure than you might think. I don't like Abby's villain speech because part of what made that scene so real and raw was that Joel doesn't get to spend his last moments alive with the certainty of knowing exactly why this is happening. No, in the game he doesn't get any such peace and instead has to spend his final moments thinking about all these people he murdered to try to figure out who could be connected to this woman exacting her revenge. He is forced to reckon with his actions, and yet the look on his face as he tells Abby, "Why don't you just say whatever speech you've rehearsed and get this over with," is so defiant and so self-affirming that you have to respect his unshakable conviction in those very actions. It echoes the themes of the first game so succinctly that it makes the walls between reality and fiction come down to create the kind of art that exists across both dimensions. What would you do for your child? And not only that, but how at peace are you with every step you took to get to where you find yourself now? And from Abby's side, you feel just how long she's been waiting for this moment. She has no time to waste on some speech. She is ready to kill him, and he is ready to die. Their readiness for this moment is a pure balance of life and death. That was another thing the show unnecessarily muddied up. You don't get the sense of time passing because the time they could have spent showing how long Abby has been looking for Joel is wasted on the attack on Jackson. All you see is Abby at her father's grave, then cut to Abby and Jackson. If they had at least shown the scene at the aquarium where she tells Owen she has a lead on Joel's brother, you would get some sense of how long she's been obsessed with finding him, and then she wouldn't have had to have a cliche villain speech. I really wish that was all, but we still have Ellie. Let me just preface by saying I don't have a problem with Bella. I think they did great on season 1, and they actually managed to improve some parts of it with their version of some scenes. Important ones too. The scene where Ellie kills David all the way until she finds Joel is somehow more raw, more brutal, and at the same time vulnerable that it gives me chills every time I watch it. It's some of the best acting ever in my opinion. They nailed 14-year-old Ellie because they look like a 14-year-old and act like one in season 1. In part 2, Ellie is not just taller and older looking, but acts more mature. I remember what it was like to be 19 and wanting to be taken more seriously, wanting to act more mature, and she embodies that age shift very naturally. You can feel how she's changed, not only because of the years, but because of what's happened since the ending of part 1. It's had a big effect on who she is as we find her being a part of a community unlike any she's had before. I don't care for this new version of Ellie who still acts like a 14-year-old, nor for the version of Dina who matches that 14-year-old energy. It's a big problem when your main character acts like a brat instead of someone whose demeanor reflects the way an adult sits with negative emotions for long periods of time. The way all those emotions find a pressure point when Joel dies and subsequently give way to a violent chain reaction when she arrives in Seattle is integral to how real Ellie's actions feel, even if they also appear out of character. That is such a core component of part 2 that I'm having a really tough time believing the show will deliver. There are other changes I don't understand but dislike on a more personal preference level, like Ellie being with Jesse and Joel with Dina during the snowstorm. Because the grow house sequence is a personal favorite, and I really like that Ellie first tells Dina about her immunity there. I also don't know why Jordan, Leia, and Danny aren't part of Abby's crew, but it doesn't matter as much beyond it feeling like they didn't have the budget to hire 3 more actors with barely any lines of dialogue. What I really didn't like was how that whole sequence was structured in the show. Beyond Abby hitting us over the head with her villain speech and her super awkward remarks about Joel being really attractive, which feel more like someone writing the script really wanted Pedro to know he's attractive than something you'd say to your parents' murderer, I just thought the crew did not feel like military. They just felt like nervous civilians, which was very off-putting. In the game, you can actually see their military training in action, and even when Mel is asked to tourniquet Joel's leg, her reaction only slightly betrays her emotions as she follows her orders. And then they all just leave with Ellie fully conscious without saying anything? It honestly feels like what you'd get if you told complete amateurs, "Here, write me a script for this scene and then perform it." It looks like the way people write and act who know nothing about writing and acting. The more I sit with what the show is doing so far, the more I get the sense that the show has no faith whatsoever in the portion of the audience who hasn't played the game, and I feel bad for them, but I feel worse for those of us who have spent countless hours unpacking and figuring out what the story means on a personal level. Some people might say I'm being harsh, but they literally hinted at Joel and Ellie's reconciliation at the beginning of the season on episode 2. We still have most of this season and a whole other season before we're supposed to know about that. In the game, that part takes all the loss we've experienced throughout the story and frames it in the most inexorably tragic retrospective. They had just started to make amends, and Ellie's journey throughout this whole story was fueled not by the need for revenge, but by impotent rage for having wasted her last years with the person she loved the most being mad at him, and ultimately unable to tell him how much she loved him despite their disagreements. We don't get to know that until the very end. It's the second to last cutscene before the credits roll, and it hits you so hard it shatters your heart in a million pieces. That knowledge is reserved for the ending because the game doesn't care about your impatience. It has a story to tell on its own terms, and you have to earn that knowledge. The show, in comparison, says, if we don't hold their hand, they won't find their way. If I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. If you're going to change parts of a story that is near perfect, then you must justify it with an improvement. Season 1, Bill's episode, big change, huge improvement. Showing Ellie's mother, huge change, massive improvement. The changes so far in Season 2 have not been improvements. That's it. Thank you all for watching.